Hello, I'm Julia, and in this video I'm going to tell you a little bit about my string quartet number 4. This one was written really as a finale for my quartets 1, 2 and 3 to try and bring them together a bit. And it contains references to each of those, but that said, it can also stand on its own as a piece in its own right. It's basically a big allegro movement with lots of energy, lots of momentum, and above all, it's meant to be fun. Although I wasn't particularly conscious of it at the time, I suspect there was a little bit of an influence of Dvorak, one of the quartets that I had been playing quite a bit around the time when I wrote it was the American. And I think there's something of the energy of the final movement of that in this piece. It really wants to roll along. And I always think of it as a kind of hoedown. It's got that sort of feel to it. So unlike quartets 1, 2 and 3, where I used a very simple repeating structure, for this one I've used sonata form, maybe with a bit of a rondo feel to it as the opening theme keeps coming back. So it opens with an exposition, beginning with a first subject in the tonic key, which is E minor. The first subject takes its rhythm from the opening of quartet number 2, so there's a reference there immediately. This moves into a linking passage, which takes us through G minor, and we get another repeat of the first subject, hence the rondo feel, but this time in A minor, and that takes us into the second subject, which is in A minor, which is the subdominant. All of this gets repeated, and then we move on into a development, and the development starts with the same melodic theme as the opening, but this time the accompaniment is more ambiguous, and it's actually a direct quote from the opening of quartet number 1. So it's an augmented chord. It becomes increasingly insistent up to a climax at G, where basically we're in G minor, although there's an awful lot of stuff going on here. There are lots of overlapping parts. At H, there is a return of a repeated pattern from quartet number 3, although this time it's not pizzicato, and it's much more menacing than it was when it appeared in quartet 3, so it keeps on building the tension, and we keep on moving around through various different keys until eventually we get back to a big B major chord, which leads us back into the tonic key of E minor for the recapitulation. The opening of the recapitulation is not a precise repeat of the opening of the piece. I had in mind at this point the first movement of Brahms 4, where in that case the theme is not repeated directly, but it's drawn out when it reappears at the start of the recapitulation. So rather than doing that, I've changed the rhythm and the texture here. So the theme is slightly hidden within the quavers of the viola part, and the violins have chords against it. But this only lasts for a short while. After 8 bars, we return to the original form of the first subject, and we hear it exactly as we heard it in the exposition. But this time everything becomes a little bit truncated, so when we reach the link passage it moves into D minor, and we get a brief reappearance of the second subject, which is now in D minor, which still isn't quite back home, but it does manage to find its way onto a B major chord, which is what then brings us back to the tonic of E minor. There's a coda in which the opening theme is repeated, but this time it's in very short punctuated chords which quite deliberately run away with themselves. And as the momentum builds, we get a brief nod back to quartet number 1, and then the whole thing ends. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this one, and that this gives you a little bit of an understanding of what I had in mind when I wrote it.